Today we got the first section of our new Dream Garden planted, and the first warm weather crop to go in the ground every year is potatoes. Now we're down here in South Georgia in Zone 8B, and our ideal potato planting time is anywhere from Valentine's Day or middle of February to the end of February. Typically you want to plant potatoes anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks before your last frost date. Now we have in the past got a little adventurous with this and planted them a little too early before, and we get a frost come in towards the end of February and it really stuns those plants back. So we try to be careful not to plant them too early, but try to squeeze them in that window there between the middle of February and the end of February. So I've got my seed potato pieces here, and we always cut up our seed potatoes because they go farther and because of the size of potatoes that we're trying to get. So if you plant a whole potato, you're probably going to get more potatoes, but they're all going to be small. If you cut them up and reduce the number of eyes that you're planting in a certain spot, you'll get those nice big potatoes that we all want. We like to cut up our seed potatoes several days before we intend on planting them, because we want to give that open wound or that skin there time to heal over or suberize, and that's going to prevent any fungal diseases or help prevent any rotting once we put them in the soil. Now, a common misconception is that the size of this seed potato piece has something to do with how bountiful your crop's going to be, and that's simply not true. But what really matters is the number of eyes that you have per piece, and you usually want about 2 to 4 eyes per piece. That's going to give you enough for a good plant, but it's not going to be so many eyes that you get a lot of overcrowding and end up with small potatoes. These things don't need a huge piece of potato to feed off of. They're just feeding off this long enough until they can get some roots established and some leaves coming up out of the ground. Today we planted 4 varieties of potatoes, and these are the same 4 varieties that we carry on our website. We've got the Red Norland, which is a red skin potato with a white meat. We've got the Adirondack Blue, which is a purple skin potato with a kind of bluish purple meat. We've got the Yukon Gold, which is a tan skin potato with a yellow meat, and then the German Butterball, which is another tan skin potato with a little more yellower meat than the Yukon Gold. One thing to consider when you're planting several different varieties of potatoes is that they're going to have different maturity dates. These red potatoes here, the Red Norland, or what a lot of people call new potatoes, are going to mature a lot faster than this later variety or this German Butterball. So when you're planting these, make sure you understand that you might dig some of these a lot faster than you'll dig these others. In this case, you might dig this German Butterball a month later than you dig this Red Norland or new potato. In the first square of my Dream Garden behind me here is where I planted my potatoes. All of my squares are 30 by 35 feet. And the first thing I want to do was lay off all my rows, and I was able to squeeze in 10 rows of potatoes in this 30 by 35 spot. As far as row spacing goes on potatoes, I like to plant them 3 foot apart. Now I've tried to skirt that and plant 2 or 2.5 feet apart in the past, and you just don't leave yourself enough dirt in the middle to heal them up properly. You can certainly plant them 4 foot apart or 5 foot apart, nothing wrong with that. But to maximize this space right here, I planted them 3 foot apart and got 10 rows in here. So the first thing I did was I got my measuring tape so I could lay off where my rows are going to be. I got my stakes out, and I put a stake or either a mark at the end of each row, and that gives me something to drive to with my wheel hoe to make sure I get all my rows relatively straight. Then it was time to let the wheel hoe make things easy for us. So I took my double wheel hoe with my plow set in the furrow in position and ran along where I had marked off there. Made me a nice little furrow for planting these potatoes. That plow set makes a furrow about 3 to 4 inches deep in the soil, depending on how hard or soft your dirt is. But it's a really nice furrow for laying down seed potatoes. For those 10 furrows, or those 10 rows I created, I wanted to plant 2 rows of Red Norland, 2 rows of Adirondack Blue, and then 3 rows of Yukon Gold and 3 rows of German Butterball, because the Yukon Gold and the German Butterball are my favorites. So I laid those little seed potato pieces, some of which had already sprouted a little bit, down in that furrow there, and I spaced them guys out about 6 to 8 inches apart along that furrow. And I like to push them down in that furrow a little bit to make sure they stay in the right position and don't get turned over when I come behind and throw dirt on top of them. So I planted these potatoes sequentially based on maturity dates. So I planted the red New Orleans first, then the Adirondack Blue, then the Yukon Gold, then the German Butterball. And that way I can dig one row at a time as they mature, and I'm not making a mess on the other rows as I'm waiting on those to get ready. Once we had our seed potatoes stuck down in those furrows, it was time once again to let the wheel hoe make things easy for us. So I took my high arch wheel hoe, because I already had some plows on there in the hilling position, which is what we need for covering up these potatoes. And I just went down there and zipped up those rows and covered up those potatoes real nice, so they'll be able to grow up through that soil, and then we can keep hitting them as they grow. If you get tired of planting the same old red potatoes over and over every year, why don't you branch out and give some of these other varieties a try. These purple potatoes, some of these yellow potatoes are really tasty, and they complement those red varieties really well. And if you grow a vegetable garden and you're not using a wheel hoe to plant potatoes, what are you thinking? I'll put some links in the description below so you can check those out, get set up, and be planting potatoes faster than you ever have. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you next time.